was you have to treat every year. And I'm still going to say that we don't know, but there is a very good chance that every other year is going to be adequate. So let's just say you have a 12, 15, 18-inch trunk diameter ash in front of your home that is worth mega dollars, period. I don't want to get into evaluation, but it's mega dollars even to you alone from shade standpoint, because you can have it done. You can do it yourself. You can buy the right materials, mix them, and by all means, again, read the label, pour it around the trunk, usually in the fall, up through the period of time we're speaking right now, or start very early in spring, because it takes up to, I'm told different things, or I've heard and understand different things, but it takes at least 30 days for the material to get through the bark, into the tree, distributed, and doing some good. The borer doesn't usually hatch until around the middle of May, depending on where you are in the state. So if you have the material in place, it is now, in my opinion, going to be worthwhile trying to save individual trees. Mm-hmm. Can you save every one in a 40-acre wood plot? No, I don't think the finances would allow that. But there is light on the horizon, and I'm going to bet with modern chemistry and the size of risk that this little creature is to the entire continent of North America, there will be some more solutions coming along. So let's just say that it is there, it's evil. One of the reasons it's so evil is it eats right just below the bark, and ash trees are, well, they're called ring porous, and it means essentially that only that first layer of wood below the bark is actually functioning, distributing water, food, et cetera, et cetera. This is not technical, but essence now. Whereas the old, clear-winged borers that would eat into ash trees, they'd go clear through into the heartwood. They would mess up a log as far as any future use, but they would eat their way in straight. They would eat their way back out straight, so they're ruining only a little bit of vascular tissue. This little rascal gets in and eats around in galleries right below the bark and destroys the whole tree. So that's why she are so deadly. But let's not despair and be aware that by you listening again in the spring, and I'm finding out more from winter meetings and so on, we may be able to enlighten further on this. So don't throw up your hands and just say, well, all's lost.
Right, and that they are working on it very hard. I know
yes.
At the state level.
Very hard.
They're working very hard on this. And also, as you mentioned, the chemistry is getting, we've even talked to some of the chemists and people with the companies who have been putting together these systemics that can, get inside the tree. Another thing, too, is this time of year, it's important to, on the prevention side, not to move firewood around.
That's right. I'm glad you brought that back up. I have a sticker on the back of my car. I've had 100 questions at minimum, and I'm always glad because that means 1,000 people have seen it. It just simply says, do not move firewood. I simply took an excerpt from one of the bumper sticker types of things, put it in the back of my car, and on each door. So sitting in a traffic light, people see it. And I get, well, why not? Because you and I, as the average citizen, non-forester, non-woodcutter, cannot tell an ash log from a maple log from an oak log once the bark's gone. And this little rascal can be transported and is, in fact, being transported around by taking plants that have the borer in it to new places. That's how it got in this country in the first place. It came in probably on shipping materials out of Southeast Asia. A mated female only would take one, comes in on a shipping cart, and all of a sudden Detroit is going under, then it's over in Windsor, and now it's 44 of Ohio's 88 counties, and moving on. And you say they're working hard on the state level. They're working hard on the federal level, too, because I'm serious. This little rascal can kill every known ash on the North American continent. Now, that's pretty good size area. That's a few 100,000 acres.
Right.
Or millions, billions, and so on. So it is a problem, and it's one that we can tackle.
Another thing, we've had a lot of emails and a lot of questions recently about mulching.
Yes.
Winter mulching.
Yes.
Why, where, how much. Talk a little bit about what you need to mulch for the wintertime.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that it is not too late to do so. Matter of fact, long about this moment in time, the ground is starting to get cold. Now, it may have frozen a little bit in certain areas, but it isn't frozen. The roots that are immediately below that frost are still running in soil temperatures of perhaps as much as 50 degrees. Now, they're going to get cooler, cooler, cooler. And that is the norm of winter. The reason for our construction zone, rules is that we have to build a foundation to at least 36 inches deep in the ground because we know Ohio, at least the northern part, can freeze that deep in the ground. Fact. But it freezes very, very, very slowly, down a little bit at a time, depending on how cold. Then, under normal conditions, the forest floor in particular, which we're trying to emulate with mulch, it thaws very, very, very slowly. Well, what happens then with mulch is we groom our lawns, and it's necessary to do so because grass doesn't care to be, well, let's just say infringed upon by a whole truckload of leaves, and et cetera. We have to then do it in certain areas. We're going to slow down by virtue of a mulch, slow down the penetration of the cold, and then the rapidity of the thaw. That will save root tissue. And I'm not going to try to, because I'm not even sure I understand quite why fast freezing and thawing kills when slow doesn't. I didn't stay in class that day, apparently, but at the same time, it boils down to the fact that we can emulate the flora of the woods, and I don't think anybody will disagree that for several 100 million years there was nobody here with a rake in their hand, and all the leaf litter fell, all of the dead wood fell, etc., and it formed this beautiful blanket of mulch, as we now call it, over the root zones of trees, and the trees in a forested or wooded situation may not ever have frozen roots. Mm-hmm. Roots of trees cannot tolerate what we call zone 5. Just to digress to that, most of Ohio is in 5 or 6, depending on who you argue with, and 4. That means that as the soil hits 32 degrees, the top of the tree can freeze on down to minus 20 in zone 5A up in the northern part of the state. That's wonderful because the trees that grow there can handle that depth of freeze. The root of the same tree cannot. And much below 32, the point of freeze, which is actually a wonderful point because the ice in the soil at 32 or 31.5 degrees insulates in its own right. And we're just trying to keep that insulation in place because roots are killed at 28 degrees above zero on almost all the plants we can think of. So we're simply emulating the flora of the woods, what Mother Nature did for hundreds of millions of years, and we're trying to do it with pretty materials, appropriate materials, and then we have found out that 2 inches, maximum 3 inches, is the ideal depth. The placement should go from a little bit away from the bark, or I should say the trunk, buttress, flare of a shrub, tree, whatever it may be, because little voles and creatures like to move through that mulch and they can chew on that fresh tissue, unseen by hawks, owls, and, let's just say house cats, and they love it. So stay a little bit away, then go out to at least the full drip line on perennials, shrubs, small trees, and then your lawn trees. Make a collar at least 6 or as much as 8 feet wide to keep the mower wheel bolts off the trunk of the tree. You don't bump the wheel over the big buttress flare roots that are immediately on the surface. Looks nice, and it will also help insulate against that fast freeze and thaw. Come spring, then, our trees are going to say, hey, this was a normal winter, regardless of how cold it got, above ground, and on they go again.
What about the small plants like perennials? Do you use, when you talk mulch, are you talking the hardwood mulch that we all know or the pine bark mulch, or are you talking just maybe throwing some leaves on them?
That's a very good question, Mark, and I'm going to tell you that I think leaves will suffice. And I prefer and almost always speak to oak leaves as the ones that will maintain their physical shape over the course of a winter. They will loft up and trap dead air, and that's all mulching is doing, is creating dead air spaces over which the heat line or heat barrier is formed.
And you're listening to a special Thanksgiving weekend edition of Plant Talk with Fred Howard, the Ohio nurseryman, and we'll be back in just a minute. Stick with us.
This summer at Franklin Park Conservatory and Botanical Gardens, the gardens are in full color. Walk amidst tropical and native butterflies in flight in the indoor Pacific Island Water Garden. View the conservatory's bonsai collection and experience the exhibition Origami in the Garden. Find details at fpconservatory.org.
And welcome back to our special Thanksgiving weekend edition of Plant Talk. Fred Howard, the Ohio nurseryman, of course, here, and I'm Mark Noose, and we hope you had a very nice turkey day. Fred, here's a question from Mark in Dublin, a.k.a. me. Can I stop cutting my grass now? Can I put my lawnmower away, please?
Not yet. All I have to do is look at you and know you ate too much turkey. You look at me and know I ate too much turkey. And then we both look at our lawns, which are reasonably well cared for, and there probably is still just a hint of growth. And over the last 2 weeks since I last mowed, there is a little bit of growth. I want that lawn to go into winter sharply trimmed. Now, what does that mean? Well, I cut 3 inches tall all summer long. It helps conserve moisture, the shade of its own root system, etc. Then, pretty near like a month ago, I set the mower down to 2.5 inches to start to groom for fall, pick up some leaves along with the grass clippings and so on, which makes a nice, beautiful blend, as a matter of fact, for mulching and or composting, and now I don't want the lawn to be able to fold over itself. I don't want it to lay down. So I have moved the mower down for these last cut or two. Now, hear me, cut or two, yet to come. I've got it down at 2 inches. It'll get the rest of the leaves, and then it will cut the grass not too short and have it sunburned during the wintertime, but it will allow it to stand on its own. It won't fold over, because as soon as that folding over takes place, it traps water more than we want, and then ugly things such as, well, I've said before, there is a disease and an insect for every occasion, and snow mold is a very, very nasty factor of wintertime. Snow and ice on top of a lawn that has folded down over itself, it stays cool. There is a fungal growth that loves it at 32, 31 degrees, and all of a sudden, come spring, your lawn is now showing itself. The ice and snow are gone, and you've got great tan spots. That you want to avoid. So get it down to 2 inches. Keep it mowed as long as there's something to take off, and let's just say continue to work off that Turkey Day dinner.
Now, once I get the extension cords out for my Christmas lights, I'm going to stop mowing. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think by then you're safe to do just that. And, well, I have to go into a nasty story about myself. I went to the extent of putting on the lights on the tree, lighting the front yard, and I ran an extension cord from here to there. Mm-hmm. I was going to catch that last mowing. Oh. Do you know what happens with an extension cord at 3,000 RPM on a sharp blade? Well, it not only cuts it, yes, it'll wrap it tightly in the time it takes to shut that engine down. So I'm not going to go into my vocabulary or circumstances any beyond that. Just, you'll be ready to quit by then.
Well, I'll tell you that I did the same thing with a pair of electric hedge trimmers.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I thought they maybe I could trim that one up a little bit before I put the lights on it. Probably wasn't a good idea, let me tell you. I'll just tell you that right now. It was not a good idea.
Was it a shock-proof line?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
It was,
good.
Trip the breaker. Anyway, we don't want to go into that. Let's talk a little bit about the need for watering this time of year. Do you still have to have water?
Well, I'm going to say yes, Mark, but now we're going to get into specifics, because the odds are in all the lawns I know and have seen and can account for are in good shape. All the trees and shrubs and evergreens, this cooling and now more moist period are probably in good shape. However, we sometimes have steep slopes where the water will run off, and or a west-facing steep slope will dry quite rapidly even in wintertime. That can still need to be watered. The overhang, and some homes it's 0, some it's 18 inches, and then some of the more modern structures is 2 or 3, 4 feet out there in terms of overhang, keeping that foundation dry. And that part is good. But the plants that are in there are going to get bone dry also. And they can dry up and die, perish from lack of water in the wintertime, same as summertime. It's a slower process, but it still ends up dead plant, new plant at great expense, as well as looking bad in terms of the things that did live and so on, all the balance factors. So do water things under overhangs. That will even account for the need to water under certain great big old heavy-headed trees, even after they defoliate. There is a bit of water movement out toward the drip line just by branch structure alone, so keep those things watered. Now, some few people have things in raised planters. Not every home, fortunately, but then there's the raised garden that keeps some perennial things in it, etc. Those things can drain down, even in the wintertime. So I would say there is need to check, and then in raised or steep areas, etc., it's still necessary to water. Even to the extent you water now, you water perhaps right after Christmas. If we get that January thaw, which is not uncommon, it may be down to a bucket full or a tea kettle full of water, but go out and water those things that are under these same circumstances. Keep the roots moist. It is a mandate for plant health that the roots freeze moist. Now, I don't mean sopping wet, not in a puddle, but if they freeze moist, the water that expands 9 to 11% when it freezes, closes the little fissures and open tubes in the soil, allows or disallows the cold to penetrate so quickly, and the ice indeed forms a wonderful cover barrier against fast freeze and thaw itself. So for all those reasons, including just a simple matter of necessity for life, watch those certain areas. The rest of it, I think you can probably put the hose away at this point. I hope you have long since disconnected that hose from the faucet, because frost-free means if it's hose-free also.
Now, this time of year, like you mentioned, there may be some areas that have plenty of moisture.
Right.
If I go out, How do I tell? What's a good rule of thumb to tell if something needs water this time of year?
Well, Mark, I guess that's a question I haven't thought an answer through, so I'm going to tell you simply, you look down. If the mulch is dry, if it has lightened up in color, as you know it to be when it's dry, then you bend down, you put your finger in the ground. If it's just the very surface of that mulch and it's moist from there down, you can tell that really quickly on a cold day with a bare finger.
Yeah.
You can tell that really quickly all together. It's a visual inspection. If there